right, so this chapter is after Jesus' birth. So kind of what happens at the end of Jesus' life on earth. It is finished. Zeb sat still for a while, staring at the Christmas tree. Then he spoke quietly. Ma'am, what I don't get is how a baby could save the world. Can you explain that? Good question, the woman replied. You've probably heard some wonderful stories about Jesus' life, the parables he told and the miracles he performed. But it's what happened at the end of his life that matters most. Let's pick up the story of Aaron and Anna after they'd grown up. It's Passover time in Jerusalem. The same Passover they did in Egypt, Zeb asked. Yes, the woman replied. They were celebrating how God had delivered them from Egypt. But this Passover was the most important of all, as you will soon see. Having heard about Jesus all their lives, Aaron and Anna couldn't believe the news of his arrest. They, like many others, believed Jesus would rescue them from the Romans. Now Jesus was sentenced to die. On that day, crowds began gathering on the hill called the Place of the Skull. Aaron studied the people. The hardened soldiers used to suffering and death sat and grumbled. The arrogant centurion in charge stood near them. Efficient, unfeeling, the mocking scribes and Pharisees were there too. But most of the people were just curious onlookers who had come to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. Anna spotted a small group off to one side near the center cross. Something about one of the women drew her attention. The woman looked up, and the sun shone straight on her face. Anna tugged Aaron's sleeve. The woman was older now, but there was no mistaking, even at this distance. She was the mother they'd seen in the cave. How long they stood there, Aaron never knew. He felt in some way that he himself was dying. Everything was growing darker, till it was black as midnight. The earth began to shake. Aaron gripped Anna's arm. After a while, the shaking stopped, but the darkness lingered for 3 long hours. The scoffers stopped scoffing. The crowds grew quiet. And in that awful stillness, a single, loud cry arose. My God, why have you forsaken me? No answer, only silence. Then the same voice exclaiming, It is finished. The figure on the cross slumped. Aaron drew in his breath as Anna sobbed, but somehow they couldn't bear to leave. In the strangely dim light, a well-dressed man came with some soldiers to take Jesus' body down from the cross. They put him in a tomb in a nearby garden and rolled a huge stone across the entrance. Wordlessly, Aaron and Anna made their way home. The boy sat gazing thoughtfully into the fireplace. That just naturally ain't right. Sounds like he didn't rescue no one, just up and died. I know it sounds that way, the woman said, and the following day must have been one of the saddest in history. All Jesus' followers hid for fear of the Jewish leaders. His friends had believed Jesus was the one who would free them from the Romans. Now they were frightened and disappointed, but the next morning something happened. Before dawn, a great earthquake shook the land. The angel of the Lord descended like lightning, his clothes white as snow. Ignoring the Roman guards, he tossed back the huge stone and calmly sat on it. The soldiers shook with terror and fell like dead men. 2 of the women who had followed Jesus came at dawn and found the tomb empty. They clutched each other in fear. Don't be afraid, the angel said. Jesus has risen. Now go and tell all his disciples. Jesus showed himself to all his disciples and friends like Aaron and Anna over the next few weeks. In the garden on the road to Emmaus, in the upper room where they'd been hiding and beside the Sea of Galilee, sitting down with them all, he told them not to blame the Jewish leaders, the Romans, or anyone else for his crucifixion. He explained how, ever since the Garden of Eden, God had tried to tell people he was going to send them a Savior. And Jesus was that Savior. God did not send him to deliver them from unjust rulers, from illness or unpleasant situations. He was born to die for the sins of mankind. Those who were sorry for their sins, even the worst of people, could be forgiven. And they once more would know the joy of companionship with God not so long ago in Eden. Through his death and resurrection, the baby born that night at Bethlehem had become Lord of all. This is the real meaning of Christmas, the joy and glory of it all. It was still dark when Zeb awoke the next morning. He wasn't even sure he'd been asleep because his head was so full of all he had heard that wintry night. He lay thinking for a long time, climbing carefully down the steps from the high bed. He hopped over to the window and pulled back the curtain. One bright star was twinkling in the sky. It was dawn. The end. So what is really neat about this story is that it doesn't just stop with the Christmas story, with Jesus being born, right? It goes to the end of Jesus' time on earth when he dies on the cross, and then when he is resurrected, because that is God's plan of salvation for us, right? So that we can come to accept Jesus and love him and choose to follow him forever. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this kind of short little chapter book we read while leading up to Christmas. Bye.